It was a Friday morning in Osaka's Kitashinchi district, one of the most vibrant entertainment and business areas in Western Japan. The time was just after 10. On the fourth floor of a modest 8-story office building, about 30 people were gathered inside a psychiatric clinic. They weren't there against their will. They had come, as they did most weeks, because they were struggling with the pressures of work, with anxiety, with depression. This was a clinic specifically for workers' mental health, and many of them had been coming for months, even years, trying to get better. In the next few minutes, 25 of them would be dead. Not from a mass stabbing, not from a shooting, from a fire that burned just 25 square meters, smaller than many living rooms, and was mostly extinguished within half an hour. This is the story of the Osaka clinic Arson, the deadliest criminal act in Japan since the Kyoto Animation massacre 2 years earlier. The clinic was called Nishi Umeda A Kokoro to Karada no Clinic, which translates roughly as the Nishi Umeda A Clinic for Mind and Body. It occupied the entire fourth floor of the Dojima Kita building in Kitashinchi. A commercial district in Kita-ku. Building was old, constructed in 1970, and like many structures from that era, it had a single internal staircase. On the morning of December 17th, 2021, the clinic was running one of its regular group therapy sessions. About 30 people were inside: patients, support staff, and the clinic director, Dr. Kotaro Nishizawa, 49 years old. A little after 10, a man walked in carrying 2 bags. According to a witness in the reception area, the man placed one of the bags near a heater. Then he kicked it. The bag burst open and liquid spilled across the floor. In seconds, the reception area was ablaze. The liquid was gasoline. The fire exploded across the entrance and the waiting room, exactly at the base of the building's only stairway. Toxic smoke was instant and overwhelming. Carbon monoxide from burning gasoline can incapacitate a person in under a minute in a confined space, and the fire was burning in an enclosed fourth-floor room with effectively no way out. The elevator and the building's emergency stairs were both located outside the clinic itself, meaning to reach them, patients had to get past the fire. They couldn't. Within minutes, people inside the clinic were losing consciousness. The fire, as it turned out, burned only about 25 square meters. Firefighters had it mostly under control within 30 minutes. But by then, it was too late for everyone inside. 24 patients in the group therapy session died, asphyxiated by carbon monoxide. Dr. Nishizawa died alongside them. One person managed to escape with injuries. The man who had set the fire was still in the clinic when it was extinguished. He was pulled out alive, with severe burns over much of his body. His name was Morio Tanimoto. He was 61 years old. He never regained consciousness. This was not an act of impulse. When investigators reconstructed Tanimoto's movements in the weeks and months before the fire, what they found was a plan that had been taking shape for the better part of a year. Tanimoto's smartphone told much of the story. According to investigators, he had been photographing and recording the area around the clinic as far back as February 2021, 10 months before the attack. His phone reportedly contained notes on methods for sealing doors and deploying gasoline for maximum effect. He had collected newspaper clippings about other fire attacks, including the 2019 Kyoto Animation studio Arson, in which a lone attacker had used gasoline in a building with limited exits and killed 36 people. Investigators came to believe Tanimoto had been deliberately studying that case. In late November 2021, about 3 weeks before the attack, he purchased approximately 10 liters of gasoline at a service station near his home. And on the morning of December 17th, roughly 30 minutes before he walked into the clinic, police believe he set a small fire at his own residence. It appears this was a test. A check to confirm the gasoline would ignite the way he expected. It said that his smartphone calendar contained an entry for that date relating to checking whether a lighter would ignite. In the coldest possible terms, it was a checklist item. He arrived at the clinic shortly after 10 that morning, carrying 2 bags. A witness described watching him set the bags down near the heater with a deliberateness that, in hindsight, was the last moment when anything could have been different. Then he kicked one of the bags over. The liquid spread, The heater ignited it. The rest took seconds. One detail investigators found particularly significant. The day before the attack, the emergency exit door of the clinic had been found sealed with adhesive tape on the outside. Staff removed the tape without knowing what it meant. It has not been formally confirmed who placed it there, but given the timing and the evidence of premeditation, investigators took note of it. Here is where this story becomes something harder to sit with, because the motive was never established. Morio Tanimoto never regained consciousness in hospital. He died on December 30th, 2021, 13 days after the fire. He never gave a statement, he was never charged, he was never tried. The Osaka District Prosecutor's Office formally closed the case after his death, because there was no one left to prosecute. So we are left with what the evidence suggests, rather than what a trial or confession could confirm. The picture that emerged from his life was one of absolute collapse. At the time of the fire, Tanimoto's apartment had no electricity and no gas. His utilities had been cut off. His bank account was at zero. He had, by every material measure, nothing left. He had been a metal worker. According to reporting, he trained at his father's sheet metal factory in Osaka after finishing high school, but left when his brother took over the business. He found other work. An employer from the 2002 to 2010 period described him as diligent and skilled, but he seems to have drifted. By 2017, he was attending the Nishi Umeda Clinic for mental health support. Over the following 4 years, he returned 117 times. And then there were the searches on his phone. According to investigators and Japanese media reports, his search history included phrases along the lines of "I want attention even if I die," and queries about Japan's worst mass violence cases. Those searches are consistent with someone who was not simply planning to die quietly, but who wanted his death to matter, to be witnessed, to be remembered. That is why criminologists and investigators who examined the case have described it as a likely instance of what Japanese researchers call kuodazi sha, expanded suicide. The concept refers to an act in which a person who has decided to end their own life chooses to take others with them, not necessarily out of specific hatred toward the victims as individuals, but as a form of final statement. It's said that in cases fitting this pattern, the location and the people inside it often carry some meaning connected to the perpetrator's own history of suffering. The clinic is a key detail here. This was not a random building on a random street. This was the place where Tanimoto had gone, week after week, for 4 years. It was the one institution in his life connected to his mental health, his treatment, his care. Whatever was in his mind, and we genuinely cannot know, he chose to end his life here, in this place, among these people. Let me be clear up front. What follows is interpretation, not clinical fact. We do not have Tanimoto's words. We have no verdict. We're working from digital traces, financial records, and the testimony of people who knew him at a distance. Take this as context, not as a diagnosis. What those traces suggest is a man who, by the end of 2021, had reached a kind of absolute zero. Not just financially, though the empty bank account and cut utilities tell their own story, but in terms of meaning and connection. He had no family visible in the reporting. No support network anyone has described publicly. His sole sustained connection to any institution in his final years appears to have been the clinic he ultimately burned. The expanded suicide framing is useful here, but it needs to be handled carefully. Research on this type of violence, including in peer-reviewed work specifically on this case, published in the journal Disaster Medicine and Public Health Preparedness, tends to point to a profile of someone who has concluded that their own death is inevitable or desired, but who cannot tolerate the idea of dying without being noticed. The act of involving others becomes, in a profoundly disturbed logic, a way of mattering. The phone search for attention, even if I die, fits that framework almost precisely. There is also the Kyoto Animation parallel. Tanimoto had been collecting information about that attack for months. An attack in which a man who believed he had been wronged by an organization brought gasoline to a building full of people and set it alight. It's said that the parallels were not lost on investigators. Whether Tanimoto was directly copying the Kyoto case, drawing inspiration from it, or simply cataloguing it as an example of what was possible, we cannot say with certainty. What we can say is this: 117 visits to a mental health clinic over 4 years is a profound attachment. A person who attends therapy that consistently is, in some sense, still trying, and yet something shifted. The money ran out, the utilities were cut, and whatever the clinic had been giving him either stopped being enough or stopped being available in the way he needed. There is a terrible irony in the target he chose. The people who died in that room were there because they were struggling too. They had come for help, to a place they believed was safe, to sit in a circle with others who understood what it meant to find work and life overwhelming. The doctor who died alongside them, Kotaro Nishizawa, had built his career around supporting exactly that kind of person. None of this explains why those specific people had to die. There is no answer that makes that make sense. After the fire, Japan moved quickly on the structural failures the attack had revealed. The Health, Labor and Welfare Minister and the Internal Affairs Minister ordered emergency inspections of approximately 30,000 multi-tenant buildings across the country. Older buildings, like the Dojima Kita building, with single stairways and inadequate fire egress. For a crime that killed 25 people with a fire that burned only 25 square meters. The lesson was clear. If the stairwell is the only way out and it's on fire, everyone above it is trapped. But for the families of the 25 who died, and there have been memorials every December 17th since, flowers left at the building, quiet gatherings in the rain. Building codes are not the thing that keeps them awake. There was no trial to attend, no perpetrator to face, no testimony to hear. Morio Tanimoto took whatever he knew to the hospital on December 30th, and it stayed there. That absence is its own particular grief. When there is no explanation, families are left to construct their own, to wonder whether it was the clinic or something that happened in his treatment, or simply the fact that it was the one place he had left. The answer might have been all of those things, or none of them, or something Tanimoto himself might not have been able to articulate, even if he had lived. We simply don't know. What we do know is that he planned this for nearly a year, that he researched other attacks, that he stocked gasoline, that he tested the fire in his own home on the morning he carried out the attack, and that somewhere beneath all of that deliberation was a human being so hollowed out that this is the shape his despair took. Japan has developed some of the world's most sophisticated occupational mental health infrastructure, clinics specifically designed to hold people up when work and life become too much. This attack happened inside one of those clinics, aimed at the people inside it. It's worth sitting with that contradiction. The 25 who died were there because they were still trying to get better, and the man who killed them seems to have been someone who had stopped believing that was possible. For himself at least, and maybe in whatever darkened logic had taken hold of him, for anyone. There are no clean lessons here, only the grief of the families, the names that will never be publicly released in Japan out of respect for their privacy, and the question that will never be answered. Thanks for watching. If this kind of careful, considered look at Japan's most difficult cases is what you're here for, subscribe and stick around, because understanding the why, as hard as it is the only thing that might help us see the warning signs earlier.